Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. Staci, so happy to have you here. You're the commercial manager. You know who you are, but you're the commercial manager with SA Expeditions. So welcome to the show. Happy to have you here.
Thanks. No, it's great to be here.
Hey, real quick before we get started, because this is not the most important thing we're going to discuss, but maybe someone listening to this is commercial manager. What does a commercial manager do for a tour operation company? So I figure let's get that out of the way. What does a commercial manager do?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I do is manage the relationships that we have, as well as help oversee our sales team. We also have recently expanded worldwide. And so currently, and I say a lot of what I'm doing right now, a lot of what I'm doing is helping to refine these new destinations and helping to build them out. So we're trying to bring in a lot more client interest and demand to the new regions we've gone worldwide. So that's kind of the bulk of my world right now.
Got it. So when you say the relationships we have, are you working primarily with kind of outbound tour operators, travel agents, business to business on that end, or is it more with your DMCs and your partners on the ground, or
exactly.
both?
Exactly. No, I mean, both, I guess. Yeah. Because it's sales. I live in the sales world, so it could go both. But as far as managing the partner relationships, it's more like with our DMCs, our on the ground partners, the product that we're selling, how well we're operating in country, the reps that work with our sales team, everything that has to do with the actual relationship in any country that we operate.
So it's almost literally all the relationships on some level. You touch them all, don't you?
It's a lot, especially because we've gone worldwide. But, I'm not solo. I've got, my the other managers in the company also kind of join in. And because we've expanded so much recently and gone worldwide in a few years, it wasn't, just me alone. It was Riva, our COO, Nick, our CEO. They were very heavily involved too. So, but yes, maintaining those relationships, ensuring that they're operating as smoothly as possible, and that our sales team's happy with the support that they're getting on the ground from our partners in each country as well.
Very cool. Well, I'm happy that you gave some shout outs and some kudos to other people on the team and didn't just make it sound like you're doing it all yourself, because I'm hoping you'll share this episode with them and they may hear it someday. So that's important. And you mentioned going worldwide and expanding your operations. So that leads me to the question, SA Expeditions, what's the name mean? Where did that come from? And are there any plans to modify that at all?
No, it's a good question. I think I'm not the one who created the name. I did come on board with SA, in the early years, but I didn't create the name. But I think the goal was actually always to become a world, tour company. And so SA was intentional in that it wasn't South America, which is where we started.
Okay.
So it wasn't intentional that was only South America. I mean, it could expand across to South Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia. So there's a lot of...
That's true. That does leave you a lot of options that you could still cover and just brand it as, this is, South Asia, Africa.
Who knows? Maybe one day we'll...
But it was SA did stand for South America, right?
I mean...
Or do you know?
that was the intention, but I think also the intention was that it could be flexible as we grew. So South America was initially what we did sell, and that's where we started. And it's still a big chunk of what we sell currently. But I do think that SA, yes, it does stand for South America, but it's not only South America, and that was the intention there.
Well, it could become super adventures expeditions, or
I mean, some clients like to make up names for us. So yeah,
I'm sure. So, well, I appreciate you sharing a little bit of the business part of it, just jumping in right in. And I think it's more important. I would love to hear a little bit about your story, kind of how you got from wherever you were to where you are now, and we can go back as far as you think is relevant. So, what's the story? How
do you want the long-winded, or do you want the?
Well, we got an hour. We got about an hour. So, start wherever you want. Sometimes we start out with very, very young, my guests were on, in a backpack, and their parents were carrying up the side of mountains, and that's how they got started. So whatever you think is relevant.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the initial inspirations potentially we could look at travel inspirations. I mean, my mom. So for example, my mom, she didn't even have a passport until I moved international. And so it definitely didn't stem from her. We did move a lot as a child because, we just didn't stay in one home for long. So I think that I enjoyed that movement. But I think the inspiration, I got the inspiration for travel from others close to me. So like my aunt, for example, she was a big traveler. I have this memory of getting a postcard from her from a trip that she went to Turkey. She was in Turkey for an eclipse that happened there. And it was just like this mystical photo on this postcard that she sent me from there, or on her return home, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. But I remember looking at that and being like, wow, there's some really neat things out there in the world. And then my stepdad, when I was a little older, he worked in construction. So he was often, there's a stint there where he traveled throughout the US, and he was in, Miami, Florida at one point, sending me photos hanging off the side of a building with like the beautiful blue backdrop behind him. And then he was in Alaska for a while there for a few months, sending me photos of like moose behind him and like, talking about the 24-hour daylight. And so I was just intrigued, I think, at a young age. And I never went international until, I went to Mexico. I know that's international when you're looking.
It is.
It's technically international, but I'm from Texas. So,
so it's kind of not. I lived in Arizona for a while. I get it. Yeah. It's close.
So I'm from Austin, Texas, or the area. And so my grandparents were actually missionaries. And so they would actually cross the border quite a bit. And so they would come with their big old RV and pick up me and my brother. And like, we'd drive all the way across the border and go into some mountainous community in Mexico that they were like building some, church school in, whatever it may be, and stay like the summer months with them. And so that pushed me kind of in the direction of language. So Spanish. And so I started picking up on Spanish. I studied it for many years, had this kind of desire that was building in within because of just the few bits of inspiration I mentioned. And so when I finally hit college years, I think that's really when it catapulted. And I studied abroad and went on some big trips there following, which I'm glad to go into. But yeah, that was kind of the first time I really went on an international flight, was in college at a study abroad program that I did through my university. So yeah, I went to Tasmania for the first time, as far as I could possibly go.
Yeah.
Well, I initially, Spanish was a big thing. I studied, I studied in university. I studied marine biology. Nothing to do with what I'm doing right now. Love to scuba dive, but not what I'm doing on the day in, day out. But I was minoring in Spanish. And so when I was looking at study abroad opportunities, because my university offered this really great program where you could go and study abroad, but, pay the same tuition you're paying back home. And so there was just no additional fees or anything. And it was super accessible to whoever wanted to take advantage of that. And so I started exploring all the programs, and my mind was just like everywhere. I was so excited. I was like, what am I going to do? And I was really considering somewhere Central America. I thought, Spanish, I've got to go somewhere and really kind of improve my Spanish. I've got to live somewhere for a while. And I essentially decided, you know what, it's not going to be enough to do just like a study abroad to become fluent. And that was my goal. And so I thought, I'm going to focus on my major and go somewhere that's more marine biology, linked. And so I found Tasmania and I thought this sounded so cool. It was so far away. And so I took the leap and boarded, I don't remember what, like a 20-hour flight or something insane. Plus, I forget the route. It was the first one so long ago, but it was a long first flight. But yeah, and so I went into the study abroad in Tasmania, Australia for the first.
It's very cool and definitely not Spanish related, but I hear what you're saying. I'm curious. Like when you already kind of started on the Spanish. I can appreciate that you were intrigued by trips to Mexico and then marine biology. What did you envision yourself doing when you were 18, 19 years old?
I really, thinking back, what I think my 18-year-old self was thinking at the moment was, hey, I really need to get like a bachelor's degree of sorts under my belt if I'm going to just do anything that's even higher level, but I'm probably going to have to go back and get like a master's if I'm going to specialize in something. So why not study something that I like really enjoy, even if I don't know if that's really the route I'm going to go. And so I really wasn't sure. I went into school thinking, okay, you know what? I'm going to study for 4 years. I love science. I'm good at math. I love to scuba dive. Let's make it fun. And then Spanish, I really want to become fluent. And I'd taken 1,000 years and I still wasn't. So I was like, I'll try to minor in it too, And then after that, we'll see. I figured I'd take some time off, explore the world and see what I really wanted to do. And then that essentially led to travels that took me to South America. Go ahead.
Do you remember thinking, I'm just curious if you were thinking, like the obvious place I'm thinking of is like the Galapagos, right? Marine biologist with Spanish minor.
Yeah.
Was that on the radar screen or?
No, it wasn't. You know why? Because I know it sounds crazy. I did marine biology, but I never really actually thought I'd end up in a career with marine biology. I did it because I literally thought I would enjoy it and get a bachelor's. Yeah. And I just didn't see myself working in a lab which I know there's other jobs and other things you can do, but I just thought maybe, I wouldn't necessarily go that route. I was like, I'll just scuba dive everywhere and I'll understand what I'm looking at while I'm underwater. So that was kind of the push in that direction. But yeah, the Galapagos wasn't initially on my radar, to be honest, until I traveled to South America. And I honestly didn't even know a whole lot about the Galapagos until I was in South America. But yeah, I think that was it. I studied abroad, had a great time in Tasmania for 6 months, or it was 5 months or something of that nature. Met tons of international people from around the world. And that was just kind of the beginning of so much traveling that I did following. And so, because even when I was in Tasmania, I hopped up to the mainland up north, saw a little bit of Australia, and then hopped over to Fiji. And was like, I'm here, why not? So I took advantage of traveling around there. And then, but yeah, and so then I finished up my degree and decided, at that time, I wasn't quite ready to settle in and look for, a full-time gig at that moment. When I graduated, I thought I really want to kind of get out and explore the world more. So, all throughout college, I was waitressing and I had a little stint at Greenpeace, which was fun. And
oh yeah, interesting. Yeah. Actually, I'd like to learn more about that. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it was just one of those, I was always into sales. I really had that personality, I think, being a waitress. And I was really on this kick of, I want to save the world, but in a minor, not so extreme passion. But I did want to get out there. I wanted to explore what opportunities there were in kind of the more nonprofit kind of gig. And started canvassing initially with Greenpeace and realized, wow, this is no joke. This is a really difficult, interesting new world. And so I explored it for a few months, but realized at that time I really wanted to get out and more kind of explore the Latin Spanish speaking world and live somewhere that I could really become more fluent in Spanish. And so that's where that transition happened. It was around the time where I was doing Greenpeace, just after graduating college from university and just deciding that I wanted to move somewhere that was Spanish speaking.
If you were to have a conversation with someone that's never learned another language, has maybe not even any interest in it, and to try and explain to them what it is why would you want to learn Spanish or another language? What's the draw to that other than having gone across the border with your grandparents? What's the draw? What gets you excited about learning a different language?
Oh, it's the culture. It's really getting to know someone that grew up in a completely different place, different country, with different just like customs and different like, experiences than I had. And so just being able to fully connect with them. I know a lot of people speak English, but when you actually travel to these countries, Spanish speaking countries, you can really connect on a different level when you can speak their language fluently. And it's just, I don't know. It's been super intriguing. I want to be able to understand more of the world in general too. Like you hear songs or just shows that I know some people have talked about or whatever it may be. I just want to be able to explore and understand a different kind of part of the world. And I think the cultural aspect was really a big push to get to know people more in depth that, don't speak English or maybe can't express themselves so closely or so well in English. And so,
yeah. Yeah, I get that completely. And in my journey of learning Spanish, I started to see the importance between language and culture. It's not just that I'm able to communicate with them. I believe their culture is literally as different because of the language.
Yeah.
It's almost inseparable. It's like, I'm trying to think of a good example, but just in the way that people express themselves in Spanish, you can see it in their culture as well. Like the word adios. If you don't really know the connections, it's like, okay, that means goodbye.
Yeah.
But what does it really mean? It's, it's gracias adios. It's thanks to God.
Yeah.
Or it's the way they express, me encantas, te quiero, te amo, the different ways they say I love you and the different levels of what each one means.
Yeah.
And as you learn the language, you start to kind of understand why the culture works the way it does. And I guess my point is, like, let's say you take a country like Colombia, and let's just say they just speak English for some reason. The culture's, in theory, this is all just, okay, the culture's the same, but they speak English. I don't think it's possible, number one. Number two, okay, I could come here. I wouldn't have to learn Spanish. But you can't separate the two, right? I don't even know where I'm going with this other than, and you don't get it until you start to learn a language.
Yeah.
And especially if you live in that culture, because even learning a language back in the US, it's really hard to make those connections.
Yeah.
But it's when you get in a cab or on the bus and you're trying to find your way somewhere and 5 or 6 people on the bus are all speaking to you at the same time, trying to help you. And you kind of figure out, the language, the culture, it's really, I get it.
I wish I could remember what it was. I was just having a conversation with my husband. He's from Lima, Peru, my husband. We speak English and Spanish. He speaks it pretty fluently too, because we were living in the US for a while too. And we came back to Peru and we were talking the other day, but there was this one thing I was trying to express in Spanish or trying to translate in English. I was like, how do you say this? And it was just, there was no translation because it was just like expressive on its own in the way of you saying it. It's in Spanish. It was just, it meant its own thing. I wish I could, but yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating. I mean, also I really love, I just love the culture. I love how bright, the Latin world is. And so I grew up a lot with it too, like in Texas. Some of my best friends, their parents or their grandparents were from Mexico. And so it was just like the food or just hearing the language or just their personalities. It was just, there's so much flavor to it, and it was just something I was super intrigued in. And I also always worked in restaurants. Like I said, I was a waitress. And so you would often find me, in the kitchen speaking with the staff and trying to practice my Spanish and laughing and just the conversation that would ensue. It was just, I don't know. I just was always drawn to like the Latin world and dance. Love to dance. And before I haven't talked about the story yet, but before I came to South America, I went and actually lived with my aunt for a few months, who is in California, as just a means of ramping up on some cash flow before I could, travel for a few months with a friend of mine and backpack around South America. And my aunt, she dances salsa and she's really great at it. And so it was just me and my aunt, and she would take me out to these nightclubs and I would just go dance salsa with her. And I remember just sitting there watching her. I'd be sitting next to her and a guy would come up to her and ask her to dance. And I was like, I was just raising my hand trying to get someone to dance with me. But it was so fun. You would go to dance classes like this free dance. And so I really, that was that was huge because it really kind of put me in the mental headspace, I think, before I went on this big backpacking trip to South America. And I learned how to dance salsa, and, California is a great spot to eat really, some great foreign, foods and whatnot. So, but yeah, it was good preparation before I headed south.
It's cool for those that are, that are listening to us that are not able to see your face on the screen. I can see the animation and it resonates. I'm looking at you, Staci. I'm like, okay, she's in my tribe. She, like everything you're saying is exactly the way I feel. And I have friends and family back home that just don't understand it. My mom denies that we had this conversation, but I remember it quite clearly. 2.5 years ago when I had traveled quite a bit, but I didn't know any Spanish. And, I sold all my stuff and bought a one-way ticket to Colombia with thinking I'd stay here a month and then work my way down the coast and just keep going. Fell in love with the place. But I remember before I left, my mom said, "Can't you just move to Seattle?" And I was like, I don't think she gets when I say I want to change a scenery, I don't think she quite understands the drive and the desire to just really go someplace completely new. My son asked me the other day, "Why did you pick Colombia?" And I remember I was working in the travel business, running Orvis Travel. And somebody from Colombia came through and invited me to come down and see the Cañón de Cristales, or Caño Cristales, which is a beautiful place, but it's kind of off the beaten path. And at the time there were security issues. And my boss was like, "Well, I just don't think we can sell Colombia. I don't think it makes sense for the company to, whatever." And my wife at the time was, "No way, you're not going to Colombia. It's too dangerous, da, 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 da." And so when after I went through my divorce and I finally got up the gumption to sell all my stuff and start traveling, Colombia was like the place that I'd been told twice that I couldn't go. So it's like I had to go to Colombia. Nobody had ever told me I couldn't go to Seattle. So I think there was part of that was, seeking some independence as well. And then, my dad was concerned. My dad was the most adventurous person I thought he was the most adventurous person in the world. And when I said I'm going to Colombia, he copied and pasted. If he's listening to this, "Dad, I love you. I'm happy that you care for me so much." But he copied and pasted the entire State Department warning into a text message and sent it to me. Yeah. And I got to Colombia knowing no Spanish at all. And I remember when I started to, I could walk into a tienda and they would notice that I wasn't from here and they would chat with me and I would chat with them. And I was like, wow, I kind of understand the context of this conversation and I can actually continue the conversation. And I'm a single guy, so maybe I go on a date with somebody that doesn't speak English. That was a mind blower. First time I went on a date with somebody that didn't speak English. And it was 3 hours at the restaurant conversing, the phone in my pocket. It was amazing. I felt, oh my gosh, I'm home. It's just this, I can communicate with somebody that has a different experience in life than I do. And they've got so much that they can share with me. And I was just it was like a sponge. Yeah. And I still feel that way. I mean, I don't understand everything everybody says to me. It's more apparent with my son since he's traveling with me, because someone will come up and say something and they walk away and Jackson's like, "What did they say?" I'm like, "I have no idea." And I was trying to explain to him that I sometimes it takes a little bit of work to try and focus. And sometimes I just shut it off. If I have a preconceived idea that they're asking me for something that I'm not able to provide, I tend to just kind of shut it off, but when things are important, I can get through it. So anyway, that's a lot.
The first year I lived in Peru, I was just exhausted. And I came in with a really solid base in Spanish. So I can only imagine how I feel on the daily.
Well, and as the relationships progress, I've noticed that I get to the point where I'm like, can we just please not talk? And I don't know if it's if it's an avoidant attachment style or if I just literally physically, mentally just drained. I cannot try and get through one more conversation today where I only understand about 80% of what you say. And I'm pretty sure that the other 20% is important. And then there's also that you just know, how many times can I say, "Okay, otra vez un poco más despacio, again, a little slower. How many times can you say that with somebody before you're just embarrassed? You're like, yeah. So anyway, so when you met your husband, did he speak English when you met?
He spoke a little bit of English. It wasn't that solid, though. Our relationship was really kind of based on Spanish. It wasn't until, well, actually, he would practice with me, but mostly it was music is how he started getting into English. So he would speak little bits and pieces there.
Did he have incentive to learn English other than just your relationship with you? Was there something else motivating him?
Yeah. So he's quite a motivated personality in general. So I think just in general, like you say, hey, you got to learn English because if you want to talk to my mom.
Oh, there you go.
Because my mom doesn't speak
Well, some guys might see that as an excuse not to learn.
Right. Motivation. In his case, he was motivated. But he also had always, there was always plans for him to go to the U.S. at some point. He has some family out there and he's a chef by profession. And so he was going to go help out some family with some of their businesses in the U.S. and whatnot. And so he had kind of goals of learning English. So I think he was already kind of learning it when we met, but it wasn't until we met that really pushed him into the language more.
I'm curious and this doesn't need to all be about him, but he's a good example because you're with him a lot. But I'm curious if like when you travel with him to the US or maybe other Spanish, other Latinas, when you experience their, if they travel to the US with you or if you're whatever, did they seem to have the same like kind of open eyes, like, holy cow, this is so cool, like you and I seem to have when we talk about Latin America? Yeah,
it's interesting because I do think so. I think at first it's a different thing. It's new. They're taking it all in, it's different. But, fun fact, we moved to the U.S. After so I came to Peru in 2010 initially, was here for about 5 years. And then we moved to the U.S. for 8 years and I actually just came back a year ago. Okay. Back in Lima, but as of just a year ago. So we were in the U.S. So I got to see him kind of like, wow, this is different. This is new. We moved, we lived in Colorado. We were in Boulder, Colorado for a few years at that time, which was so cool because we loved to hike and nature-based stuff. And so we were just like in our element. And I think that was just a wow, like national parks, it's something that you're just not used to seeing in Peru, really. It's like, yes, you have the Andes, but it's just it's a different layout, different scenery. But, after a few years of living in the U.S., and especially because we had our child there. And so I have a 4-year-old daughter. I think that lifestyle is different. And so we ended up moving back to Austin, which is closer to some of our family, but not super close. Everything's kind of spread out. You find that in the US, people don't live so close knit. I'm generalizing because I realize there are some people that do this, but it's not as close knit. And so I think that once we had a kid, there was this much greater appreciation for being in South America around family and just like, it's no longer free for all. And in the US, we're very kind of heavily work oriented. And so, he was out all day. He was a chef. And so he was just, gone crazy hours of the day. Zoe, our daughter, was in daycare for crazy hours of day. And so it wasn't sustainable. We didn't enjoy the lifestyle that it was becoming. And so we decided we'd move back to Latin America, which has just been an amazing experience since we've been back. We're super stoked. And our daughter is just able to finally immerse herself in the culture of her father too. And I think that's really important. So she can learn both worlds.
Because there's definitely some differences. And, I'm proud of the fact and feel very fortunate of the fact that I was born in the US and, I served in the military. I'm a pretty patriotic guy. And so I'm saying all that. So then the next thing I can say is, man, the States feels awful boring to me. When it comes to the social stuff, I mean, there's places like people go out and do things. There's bars and restaurants and stuff in the US, but put in Colombia and much of Latin America, Mexico as well. And Guatemala, people don't it's not like we got to get all dressed up and go out to a bar to socialize. I mean, they're sitting in front of the tienda, which is a little market for anybody that's not familiar with the word. It's a little mini mart, but not really. I mean, they sell the very basic essentials, which includes beer and rum. And then they've got tables out front and they've got the TV going with the soccer game. And it's like they don't need an excuse to socialize. It's just on the way home from work. Right. They'll sit down, have a beer, smoke a cigarette on the street, and just chat with their buddies and their friends. And me not being from the culture, I can go sit down there and they'll strike up a conversation with me, or just, it can be some of the roughest looking neighborhoods that, maybe some folks would look at, wow, that neighborhood does not look like a good neighborhood to raise your kid. And I'm sure you could make some cases that maybe some of them would rather not raise their kids there, but there's a park of some sort or an intersection in a street, a dead end street that's real quiet, and all the kids are out playing together and throwing the balls, and they've got the dogs, and they're just socially so connected.
Yeah.
Where many of the suburbs back in the US, like people get off their school bus, they go in the house and they don't leave the house all day. And I feel like the people I'm around would just think that's crazy. Like, oh my gosh, how can you sit in the house all day? Yeah. You didn't go to coffee in the morning and have your croissant and your tinto, and they wouldn't get it. And I love that. I love seeing that here. It's so, there's always something to look at. And watch
Texas too, which half the year is just like super hot, and so it's just not inviting either. Yeah. So we had to make that change, but I was stoked to get back to Latin America or South America. Peru, I love Peru. I wasn't exactly the one who pushed us to go back to the U.S. initially. I mean, I was open to it, and I was open to exploring and living in a new place, but yeah, so I was really excited to come back.
Was he excited as well to come back?
Oh, it was his idea again. He's
like, okay, let's go.
So let's do it. So yeah.
And I guess that ties into the family stuff. Does he have family close to where you are now? Because it's so important. I could see he's like, my mom wants to see her granddaughter or whatever. I can.
He's one of 4 boys. And so, and the one brother lives afar, but he's actually moving back now. So yeah, his mom's quite happy to have all her children back in town.
Yep. And I won't ask you how that works with you. We'll continue on. So,
anyway. Mother-in-law. Oh no, I'm honestly not just because I'm being recorded, and she doesn't speak English anyway, so it's not like. But no, I hit the jackpot with mother-in-law, so she's fantastic. I'm actually really stoked to be back. And my mom in the U.S., she actually lives in California, so she wasn't near us when we were in Texas, and so. Either way, poor mom, if you hear this, I'm sorry. Either way, you lost out on me being near you. So the difference in our move playbook,
Yep. Was there, obviously I'm really fascinated by the Latin culture, and that's why I'm asking so many questions like this, but was there some resistance with his family when you guys first started seeing each other?
No. So my husband, when you asked about the language bit, his ex-girlfriend, just going into his whole history, it was actually French. And so she, his mom was already, and they're a very open-minded family. And I think they're just like, love whoever you want to love, which is great. But so he'd already kind of introduced the foreign,
broken the ice with that. And that can be a challenging thing. And I get it. If you're the typical Latina mother with, your 4 boys and maybe a couple girls, and you want to be close to the family, and then somebody from outside comes in, I think there's that fear that you're going to take them away. Yeah. You're going to take them to the US and they're never going to see them again. And I get that. And then there's also just everybody in the world has fears and concerns about people they don't understand, and living in, Medellin, Colombia is a good, there's plenty of people in Medellin that do not understand why there's a middle-aged, gringo hanging out in Medellin. They've got all kinds of stories for why I'm there. And it's hard for them to, I get in the taxi and like, oh, why are you here? What do you love about it? And I'm like, the climate, the culture, the mountains, the trees. And every single time they're like, and the chicas. They just assume that's the only reason I'm there. And they just don't believe me. They just think I'm full of it but after a while of me, speaking Spanish with them, I think they kind of start to get it, because, somebody coming here for other reasons doesn't need to, really immerse themselves in the culture. So, but yeah, so, yeah.
Well, I don't think my mother-in-law was really even worried about me even taking her child away, because I was so bought into the Peru world at that stage that she was like, good, you'll keep him here. I think that was her mindset. But then he took me elsewhere, so it was on him.
Yeah. If I meet people and they're like,
trying to think of an example, but maybe I meet somebody and they're like, "Oh, do you want to move back to, where do you live in the US?" I don't live in the US. I live here. Like, and if there's any inkling that they, if I'm dating and they're like, if I get any inkling that they want to actually be with an American guy so they can go back to the US, I'll just tell them, I'm not going back. You're barking up the wrong tree, because I'll go back and visit. My mom's there, my dad's there, my son's there. There's reasons, but yeah, it's I'm just so happy here every day. So
yeah.
And are you in Lima? Where in Peru are you?
Yeah, I'm in Lima, Peru. Yeah, this is where I'm at. It just seems to make, there's always been conversation around maybe the Cusco Sacred Valley, which is another great place. But I think Lima is just, it's more metropolitan. There, it's easier for travel with the international airport here, and just tons of restaurants, and like the lifestyle, I think, is just a little bit in line with what I am most comfortable with. But right. Yeah, Lima, Peru.
So with the expansion of SA expeditions into South Africa, Southeast Asia, all those places, is that putting more demands on you as far as traveling? Are you out and about more often now? Because that's a challenge when you've got a 4-year-old.
Yeah, no, for sure. But not so much this year. I think this year's a really big year of growth for us, really kind of establishing those destinations. I went to India last year as part of kind of our growth and development. But yeah, I think there will be more opportunity to travel here in the future. We've got, a company summit on the horizon, but it's not as part of like the actual growth of the company. I think it's more, I travel maybe a few times a year. It's not all that crazy. And often it's a little bit more local. So in South America kind of area, local in that sense.
Right. Yeah.
But, the travel is actually made easier for me now that we're living back in Peru because of the support. It's just more feasible financially as well, because in the US to have support like that isn't as easy. And so that was also a big push for us returning to Peru, is it could help me expand my travel opportunity as we go worldwide. So there was an opportunity potentially to go to South Africa this year. It didn't pan out, but yeah, there's always opportunity with our company, especially as we are growing and expanding, as you said.
We should touch on growing and expanding, because obviously that's come up quite a few times in the conversation.
Yeah.
And I have this gut that tells me that maybe some of the people listening to this podcast are people that are looking to get into the industry. They're in the industry, but they want to hear conversations with people like yourself. Maybe they're trying to figure out where they want to go, what they want to do, who they want to work with. So maybe share a little bit about essays as they expand, looking for new people. What should listeners that like what I just described, what should they know about either SA Expeditions or just your general insights and feedback into how to get a job in this business, or how to make sure you're aligning with the right people?
Yeah. So, for us personally right now, it is a year of growth, like I mentioned, but by that, we're bringing on more destination experts to support with the destination growth that we're doing. I think for one, you can also direct you to our careers page, but you can look at on our careers page, we have more detail as far as like what we're looking for in a destination expert. But generally speaking, in the gig itself, getting, firsthand travel experience under your belt is really important, because, our sales team, they can really speak to the experience firsthand, having been to certain regions. But we also encourage our team to travel a lot more. So we, as a company, provide like travel opportunity as much as possible for our team to get on the ground and see things firsthand. But also not even just that, just like sales background in general. If you've worked in the tourism industry, that's an extra perk. But if you haven't, having any kind of sales background is helpful, just because of how you interact and engage with a client is key for being in the sales front.
Sure.
Obviously you can be in marketing. There's a lot of other aspects of the job. But for speaking to what I know is our sales world. And so I think sales experience, travel experience, and just, it's really key, obviously, that you're native English, or at least just like high level English, because at least in our case, our primary client is North American.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to communicate. And it's a lot of, our team is entirely remote. So location doesn't really matter to us. In fact, it allows that kind of level of flexibility for our team to really it helps us because our team is so knowledgeable for the destinations because they are remote and they can actually go anywhere in the world and see things firsthand without it really impacting their sales ability. So
would you say that to the level of, let's say you needed a destination specialist for Brazil, and you've got somebody that communicates well in English and seems like a good fit, and they live in Brazil, that would be a perk, right?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, so right now we specialize by region. And so really it's all of South America. And so you don't have to live in the region. We do encourage getting there and exploring it. But you don't actually have to live there. If you can just speak to it and understand the product, I mean, that'll do wonders because it's all about setting expectation and be able to work with the client to build and curate their perfect trip. Because SA Expeditions, what we do is we do private custom. So it's all tailor-made travel. And we really kind of handle everything from when the clients get to South America or whatever destination that is that they're traveling to until they return home. And so it's the destination expert, what we call our sales specialists. They work with that client from start to finish to really kind of curate that perfect trip. And so being able to speak to the destination, being able to actually, sell the client on the destination, I guess, and not even not like a hard sell or anything, but, being able to speak to them and passionately about it and understand the ins and outs of the region is going to just increase your likelihood of sales. Right.
It's, you'd mentioned that you worked as a server, and it reminded me of a conversation I just spoke with Monica Sundam from Adventure Life recently. And she specifically, I think the conversation came up about like, who do you hire? Who would you hire as a guide or to lead group trips? And she said, servers. Most of the people on my team that have been the best have some sort of background working in restaurants because they're able to handle a lot of things all at once and still keep the face and still, engage with people. They come from, a nature of wanting to serve people. I would think maybe some school teachers might be good as well. In the sense that if they like to kind of educate and help people through the process and help them create an experience. Are there any other careers that, like, if you see on a resume, you're like, oh yeah, that kind of fits the, what do you call it? The avatar for our best sales agents. Are there any other jobs or backgrounds that just seem to keep coming up?
I was trying to think if there's anything that I see repetition. Not necessarily, interestingly enough, we get a lot of candidates that have already been established in fact, these tend to be some of the better candidates that already have, established careers, and it's in a different realm. So maybe they were, I don't know, a lawyer, or maybe they were, whatever it may be, in tech or whatever it may be. But because they've had kind of career experience and working in an industry where maybe they might have interacted or engaged with our certain client base.
Same type. Yeah.
Higher end client. And so, that tends to kind of give you a leg up. But yeah, like you said, I think we always will, interview and have a one-on-one with people. And you can tell just when you meet someone, their personality, I think, whether or not how they engage with you too, I think says a lot about someone. And so, but asking maybe certain questions or trying to understand if they are good at multitasking, like you said, just being a server, that's huge. And just being able to work well under pressure or, there's not a whole lot of pressure. It depends on the pressure you put on yourself because our sales team they're quite independent by nature. And so like the gig itself. And so really kind of the level of work that they take on themselves is up to them.
What is that in that type of role? What do you think is the thing that produces or potentially could produce the most sense of pressure? Because I know what my answer would be, having worked in the business for quite a while, but I'm curious, like, what is the thing that maybe keeps them up at night? Who are they afraid to let down, or where does that pressure come from?
Yeah, there's probably a ton of things. Slight tangent on that question though. It's interesting because you wonder, like, whenever you have these pressures in a work role or whatever it is, like I remember when I was waitressing, you would just constantly, you could not get to that table. You just could not get to that table in your dreams. You're having these nightmares. Where it's like the pressure, and it stems from like whatever pressures you're dealing with on the daily. And so I've asked our sales team before, like, what is it that what are you dreaming of at night?
What keeps you awake at night? Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's more like missed transfers or just like the flight was canceled or whatever it is. I think those really kind of are, that's probably more of the pressure. There's the more complicated client personalities too that maybe make you run in circles before you can like land on the most ideal itinerary. But in terms of like just pressure and stress, probably if there were anything that were to go wrong during their trip and you put so much time and energy in your heart and soul in building out that trip and then it doesn't go off.
You convince them this is the right trip. We're the right company to do it for you. We'll make sure that everything, Yeah.
It's all in your hands, and it's just, that would probably, I think, be the stem of most of the pressure.
And I think that's interesting because I've been fortunate to do a lot of kind of inspection trips, fam trips, whatever. And I've been to some places that were amazing. And I've had some experiences that are like, oh my gosh, this would be horrible if this happened to one of my clients. And so I'm super, super aware of it. And sometimes when I've worked with people a little bit newer, they don't understand how important things like a transfer, and it's not whether the transfer comes. It could be as simple as, where did they park? What was on the sign? Because if it doesn't match what you told them it was going to be, it can create so much anxiety. We discussed traveling outside the country, going to places where you're not comfortable. You don't speak the language. And maybe that's that first transfer, I think is the most important one, when they get off the plane the first time, because that sets the stage for everything. If it's a 10-minute late transfer at the end of the trip, it's a totally different deal than 10 minutes late at the beginning of the trip.
Right.
And yeah, that was what would keep me awake at night was, are my clients going to enjoy this as much as I think they will?
Yeah.
Are the people that are halfway around the world that I don't see every day, are they going to show up on time and do what they're supposed to do? And I was always at the back end when it was a great trip. It was like, oh, it was amazing. It was like a drug almost. It was, if I led a group trip, I was pretty intense the whole time in my head, just making sure everything was going well. And then as soon as we get to the airport, give the hugs goodbye. They walk towards their gate. I walk towards mine. That's the first time I'd relax, after a week and a half with my clients. It was okay, everything, there's nothing more I can do to make sure that they had a great trip. Yeah. And then also, but on the flip side, when something went wrong, it was, because I always looked at it like people have limited time. Or family, it's their last trip with their teenage son or something to go somewhere, and something happens and you can't take that back. You can't just, your washing machine broke before the warranty ran out. Don't worry, we'll give you a new one. You just can't replace that stuff. So.
No, I agree. I mean, a lot of our clients too, coming from North America, they're busy professionals and they might have like 2 weeks off, and this is their time to vacation throughout the year. And so often it's jam-packed, they want to get everything in, and so there's not room for error. And so, thankfully we're actually, not to like toot our horn, but we've got a lot of really well-established partnerships in place. Having worked in South America since 2010, we're really well-established, especially in South America. And so that's what we're doing, is we're implementing that worldwide. But I will say that it's not very often that we have errors. Yeah. We're not perfect. It happens, but I think it's how you handle the errors, yes, which really kind of makes all the difference. And so we do our really best. We're honest humans. Things, we make mistakes, but when we make mistakes, we recognize that and we do our best to fix it. And so I think a lot of our sales team, they don't really stress so much for errors necessarily, because they know we're going to handle it well themselves as being part of our team. It's just that personal pride that's kind of hit, I think, whenever.
Well, and you get attached to people, right? You get attached to people when because they're telling you, you're asking them, why is this trip important to you? And they tell you, my mom has never had a passport, and she finally got a passport for this trip because I've been telling her she needed to go to Chile and see, something down there. And yes, you get attached to them, and then it's like, you just really, I don't know. I know I did. And I suspect most of the really good salespeople, I don't even like the word salespeople, trip planners, whatever you want to call them, destination specialists, they do care. And it's the same person that if they drop a plate of food on somebody in a restaurant, they feel bad.
Absolutely.
As opposed to, well, it's not my fault. The chef heated the plate too much, is, whatever. So, all right, cool. So we covered a lot of stuff there. I have so many questions, probably just keep going forever. And you've got a 4-year-old and a job. Tell me, Staci, what should we have touched on that I missed? What should have asked you? I wrote down a couple things Actually, I do want to touch on this real quick. Is because I know it's important to you. I believe it's important to the brand SA Expeditions, but the communities, giving back to the communities and because we've talked a little bit about what we do for our clients, and they've got limited time and resources, whatever, and we worry about them. But then we also have the people on the other side that are super, super important, like critical. I don't know how, I don't even know the word to say, because if the people in the destination aren't happy, aren't able to engage with and welcome our guests, then sending our guests there isn't going to help. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, as far as like the people on the ground, our guides, our drivers, the local destinations that we send our clients to. I mean, I think the biggest thing is we look at ourselves more as like a network. So, our guides aren't necessarily like our guide per se. They work for a company that then works with us, but they are an extension of ourselves. So that's to say that we do our best to, to really kind of vet the services that we work with first. We try to work in the best, most kind of conscious way possible, like with the local communities we interact with. We try not to, there's like this Disneyland kind of experience you can see whenever you go to like the Andes of Peru or whatnot. So we try to make it something that's a little bit more closer and dear to our heart. Communities that we know we treat well, they get paid well for the visits. Our intentions are well intended. So for example, like in Peru, one of the communities we actually work with closely has close ties to the CEO of our company. And he lived in the Valley for a while and he met the families out there. And so currently what we do is we have clients go and visit this community in person and they'll meet, the goddaughter of our CEO and get to interact with the family and just, explore the local customs and culture, the local culture there through their guide who's with them, who's able to translate in case maybe they don't speak Spanish because, Quechua is the native language of the Andes. And so we're quite, I think, conscious of those kinds of, local experiences that we might provide in a given destination. But also on the flip side, how do I say it? It's just like, we care about like our client experience, but also very much so the guide. So we have guides feedback to us as much as the clients provide feedback about the guides. It goes both ways. So we hear what clients say as well as what our guides say on the ground to understand what's working and what's not working, and also try to select the best kind of quality hotels that are, going to provide the best experience for our clients, but also not a negative impact to the local community. If we hear that maybe there's not some great practices happening on the ground through certain properties, we actually take that very seriously and try to restructure the specific services that we might be offering our clients. So, or like the biggest thing too, not to focus so much on Peru, but as I live in Peru in the moment, the way there's been lots of changes in policy around the way people operate, like the traditional Inca Trail and the porter rights and how much the porters are earning. And there are some companies that bypass those rules and might still pay lower wages under the table. So we do our best to abide by those local laws in place. We ensure that our team is paid fairly. That's really important, or more so in some cases. And so I think just being attuned to how you're impacting local communities and ensuring that you're not underselling the experience at your own benefit is really important. So we just try to stay attuned to what's happening local and see how we can improve our practices in line with that.
That's very cool. Because, the people on the ground are so incredibly important. I mean, Machu Picchu is cool. Like, I haven't been, but I've heard. One of the few that haven't. I'm sure it's absolutely incredible. And if you said to me, Jason, we're going to drop you at the bottom of the trail, whatever, by yourself and point you in the right direction. You're going to walk up to the top. You're going to have this, you're going to see everything there is to see in Machu Picchu by yourself.
Yeah.
Like that sucks. That sounds horrible, and everything, Machu Picchu is still there, but it's the connection with the guides or maybe the porters. I don't know that much about the trip. Potentially other guests, that you might run into along the way. Maybe you're not a backpacker, but you run into a group of backpackers. on the trail somewhere, and you're able to connect. And it's really the big world made small is all about that, bringing people together. And without the people involved, so.
Well, we also, so like our guides, depending on the destination, depending on how much demand we have in any destination, but we do have, guides that they might not work for us, but they are exclusive to our brand. And so, I mentioned we have our company summit. Being a remote company, that's kind of one of the things that we do to bring our community together. And this year it's going to be in Medellin. I think I mentioned that to you.
I'm going to make sure we connect when you're there, if I'm still there.
That'll be fun. But in the past, and this year it's going to be a little bit more of our core network that we're bringing together. But in the past, we've actually had our company summits where we brought extended network. And so some of that was, some of our key guides in destinations. And so we would bring them, they would come to our summits and our destination experts would be like, sharing beers with our guide who serviced their client, was their main, go-to. So it's just, we have close ties. We try to keep connected and linked into the community as much as possible. But
and you got to imagine what a great thing that is for the clients, the guides, you. Yeah. So let's say, Staci, back when you were, more in the destination specialist, planner role, and the guide that's going to be hiking the trail with them, you've had a beer with them somewhere, you maybe hike the trail with them, and your client shows up and oh yeah, Staci told us this and that and this, and oh yeah, Staci's great, da 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 da. And guides, these guides, they'll pull out their phone and show the client a picture of them having a beer with you in Medellin or whatever, because that's how guides are, right? They're just like,
not even you with the guide, but the guide with another guide who the clients are going to link up with in Buenos Aires after they leave Peru or in Chile. Yeah. The guides know each other, because they
say hi to him when he gets, show him this here. Make sure you show him this picture of, fishing guides are the same way, Oh, make sure you show the next guide who I know him. He's great, but make sure you show him the picture of the big fish we caught or whatever. Yeah. And it's fun. And some of the bigger, I don't want to say bigger companies and as SA is not big, but I think you know what I mean. Some of the maybe less personal companies, you don't have that. The person that's dealing with the client on the phone has an itinerary and little blocks. They can move things around, and this is the trip. This is what I sell. And the question doesn't even come up. Have you been there? Where, it's a totally different experience when you step to that level. And when you've got those relationships with people on the ground, it's super cool. I love it. So.
Yeah. And even if it's not the company summit, we try to encourage our team, providing stipends and whatnot to get them on the ground and travel our destinations. And so they'll, visit. You see the dogs.
I do. I see your dog. For those of you that are just listening, beautiful. Looks like a black lab, is it?
He's a lab pit bull mix.
Okay.
But yeah, so we'll get our destination experts on the ground and they'll meet the guides in the different destinations when they travel there as well. So even if it's not through the summit, there's a lot of, we encourage it. There's just so many benefits, not only being able to speak to it, but clients too, they meet these guides, and the guides being able to say that they knew their destination expert it's fun.
And it's also good for your destination experts, because if they're like me, they enjoy that. I mean, yes, it's work. I know that when they're gone for 2 weeks and they go home, and their family's like, oh, you were off messing around in South America, whatever.
Can I do? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And then you've got the days of writing reports to share with the team, or it's not always quite as glamorous, but we're all doing it for a reason. I'm sure most of the people that do well in the adventure travel space have the skills and ability to probably make more money doing something else. I'm just going to say that. I think that's probably the case. But you don't get the satisfaction. I love reading reviews, when people were writing reviews about my business or Orvis Travel, and it was just, I just loved it. It just it's kind of boring or weird. Maybe it says something about me, but I'd sit on the couch sometimes on Friday night, didn't have anything else to do. I'd sit there and scroll through my TripAdvisor reviews and just bring back memories and just reconnect with the people. And, cause they'll mention personal things. Oh, it was our anniversary, or I got, my boyfriend proposed to me, my now husband proposed to me in Jason's balloon, whatever. And it's, I had a hot air balloon ride business specifically about, but anyway. All right, Staci, anything else we need to make sure we impart on our listeners before we wrap up? All right. We'll come back for another episode if you think I know there's more stuff, but
there's so much more to talk about.
It's hard to take years and years of experience in this business and condense it into a 1 hour conversation.
For sure. It's been a fun ride. We've been around since 2010 and I've been here with them for about 12 years now. So it's been a fun.
And you either really still enjoy it, because I'm looking at your face. I've been looking at your face for an hour. You either really still enjoy it or you're really good at pretending.
No,
I see the energy.
The thing is I did come in, everyone pretty much in the management role, and just, I think in a lot of different roles within our company, just about everyone's been a destination expert, been in the sales gig, quote unquote, and have moved up. And so I've been fortunate enough to be able to, explore different sides and realms of the business and have grown. I was the sales manager after that, and now I'm the commercial manager. But beyond that, I really do fully enjoy working with my peers. And so we've got a really well-rounded group of people on our team. And, the other three, Dave, Nick, who co-founded the company, and then Riva, who's the COO, they've been obviously since the beginning, and Riva's been on since the very beginning pretty much too. And so it's been fun working alongside them. And I've learned so much, and I continue to learn so much, especially as we grow as a company. And so, yeah, it's kept me intrigued, and, I'm still really enjoying it. So
very cool. Well, I can see it on your face, and I think the listeners hear it in your voice. And I suspect there's some people listening to this that are pretty turned on to SA Expeditions at this point, and probably be visiting your career page. I'll probably be on your career page here later. It sounds like a pretty good thing to do. So anyway, Staci, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.